Yes, everybody, Russ of the Western Network. Hope you're all safe and well, my friends. I generally hope you are well. Graham Potter's just finished his press conference ahead of the game of tomorrow's game against Chelsea at the London Stadium, 8 p.m. kickoff. And it was quite interesting. I thought some of it was quite interesting, particularly the end of it, something which the club website did not pick up on, which I thought was quite interesting. So we'll come back to that at the end. In terms of the main talking points, team news, Ederson Alvarez, obviously Sunderland, you can imagine what was asked and types of questions. In terms of team news, everyone's fine. George Murphy trained, not tamed today. 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗥 got over in his shoulder, so he's still missing. But apart from that, we are fine. So good to see George back in training. I don't think he'll be on the bench or anything in time, having just recovered from his ankle injury. But it's good to see. Obviously, the only issue being 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗥, but we went to a situation with that on Saturday as well. One player who may not be on the bench is Ederson Alvarez, according to Fabrizio Romano. He's given it the here we go. But asked about Ederson, he goes, nothing's confirmed. Players have to consider their game time and what's right for us, them, and the team, and that's the case, player by player. And that was the only question about Ederson. Obviously, we come off the back of a heavy defeat against Sunderland. Asked about that, he says the reality is that it was a disappointing result. At the same time, you have to analyse the situation, how we can improve. It wasn't a 3-0 game, in my opinion. I think we did a lot right until the opening goal. They scored out of pretty much nothing, and then we didn't react how we would have liked. We didn't do enough for the second goal, and the third was a breakaway. Obviously, the result creates negative feeling, but that we have to work at. We certainly do, Mr. Potter. Asked about the fact there was, heady goals and things like that. It was, pretty much 2 of those goals we should have probably dealt with. He goes, well, I think we were in 2 different situations at Sunderland. The first goal wasn't a great action from us. It's 1 in a million header that goes in the bottom corner. It's not good from our perspective, but I don't think that will happen all the time. It's one action that can happen, which is a learning point. The second goal, we got our organisation wrong, and we think we need to react better. I don't think it's necessarily a pattern, though. So hopefully no goals, heady goals will be conceded tomorrow. Asked about Mads Hermansen in terms of his, obviously he did some good things, but arguably was probably to blame for a couple of the goals. Asked whether he'd spent any time with Mads, sort of one-to-one, see how his head is at, that type of thing. He says, to be honest, I don't think I need a one-to-one with him. He's trained well and he'll be playing tomorrow. So there we go. There's more team news. He'll be playing tomorrow. But one thing that I think it was Moose or one of them asked was about reaction from that game. And he said, it's the Premier League, and I don't think we can turn up anywhere and expect 3 points. We know we need to improve. The players were gutted after Saturday. It's up to us to react and reform. And indeed, someone was saying, a game we would have expected to win, and we didn't. And he sort of bit back a little bit at that, saying, of course, the fans will want a better result and performance. It's disrespectful to Sunderland for anyone to suggest we should just turn up and win last week. We didn't play to our standards, and now we need to make sure we put in a good performance. A Sunderland side which, welcomed 7 or 8 new signings. Managed to do the business on us, to be honest. Asked about the basics. He was talking, we didn't do the basics right, and he was asked what that meant. He goes, when you understand football, you understand how the game and the goal and the environment can change. It wasn't a case of not running, because Moose asked him, basics, like the players weren't running, it seemed. He goes, but it was a case of conceding the first goal in not a good way, and then not reacting like we would have liked. We came out the second phase unorganised and didn't defend our box well enough, which we need to do. And then he was asked about the team, the team, the process in terms of what needs to be done with this team. And he was basically saying, I've known all along it's a work in progress, and you always have to balance expectation and reality. I think there's a lot more to come from the team, and I'm confident in what we're doing. At the same time, I know the result was the result, and there was criticism for that, which is fair enough. Which there should have been criticism of a poor game. Asked about Chelsea tomorrow and his thoughts about the game and particularly the club. It'll be a huge effort against Chelsea, a good performance and a bit of luck. We're playing against a talented team, so we have to have a good balance between attack and defence and give everything. Chelsea have a very talented manager and squad off the back of a very successful summer period, and we expect a big challenge. And it was asked questions about, the fact that they weren't on, very much for pre-season, or what does that mean? And he was saying, to be honest, I'm more concerned about what West Ham are doing at the moment necessarily with my team rather than worrying about Chelsea. We need to put performance in, that type of thing. Again, talks sort of the right things, doesn't he? He mentioned about Sunderland and saying how Sunderland's pit, Sunderland was probably one of the best atmospheres he experienced in the Premier League. And he asked how much of a difference it made. Of course it makes a difference, and we have to. But what we have to do is make sure we have something to help our fans with by performing, and that's a line I think is crucial. When we talk about the lack of atmosphere at West Ham, if the fan and I always talk about if I go to a comedy gig and the comedian's not funny, I'm not going to laugh hysterically throughout the whole gig. And I think that's the same with football fans. Tomorrow, under the lights, Chelsea, London derby, still early on in the season, kids are still off. It should be a good atmosphere from the kickoff. It should be. But then if we're not seeing what's being replicated on the pitch, if it's not sort of a two-way process, then the fans aren't going to, unless you're a crazy fan who just hysterically, it's a one-way street. And actually, crowd and atmosphere is a two-way street, And I think that's the same. Sunderland, they were buzzing, and and obviously they went up, and so naturally there's this sort of two-way street. But that doesn't happen at West Ham. It hasn't happened at West Ham for about a season and a half at least, And when it does happen, it's because we've had a good performance, or we've had a situation where we're playing at a higher tempo, and the crowd will respond. The crowd will respond if what they see in front of them matches their levels of energy, if that makes sense. And I think it's a really important point to make, because that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons. Not saying the reason, but one of the reasons why I think the atmosphere at West Ham can not be as good as other places, because what they're seeing, the product they're seeing, they're not excited about. They're not singing about it. They're not. It's not a two-way street. And as I said, I won't laugh hysterically at a comedian if he ain't funny, if I don't find him funny. It's the same principle. And then there was questions obviously about transfers. Obviously they asked the question about Edson Alvarez, but transfers in general. He was talking about that and PSR and he made a point of asking, talking about getting the silver bullet signing. And he was saying, that the profile is one we think about privately, because West Ham website spelled it wrong. I think that helps us in the market in terms of being sort of under the radar. It's about finding the right person, profile, and player. It's not very easy to do, especially when there are PSR restrictions. We have a certain, again spelled wrong, when I was saying that, market, and our job is to look for players who can improve us while improving the players here. And he said, every club has to work within PSR regulations, some maybe more loosely than others, in all honesty. The squad has had investment over a number of years, and we have to get more out of the players we have. We're also looking to improve, and we'll look to find a solution. It's about being a club, being a team, and being together. And what was interesting, something he did say, was the solution might not necessarily be external. The silver bullet might be internal. And then the Moose asked him what the silver bullet was, and he went, "There isn't a silver bullet." And I was like, "What?" And then he said, and then he just basically went, "There isn't a silver bullet." And he didn't say anything. He just stopped. It's like, well, you said you were looking for the silver bullet. It might not be outside. It could be within. So I just didn't understand that. So it was a little bit spiky there, and I like that when it's a bit spiky, because it shows that something's not quite right, whether it's not getting what he wants or something like that. But anyway, and that was it. We'll have Hammers headlines a little bit later on, and then we'll start all the prep ahead of the game against Chelsea later on tomorrow, 8 p.m. kickoff. Until next time, take care, my friends. If you like what we do, don't forget to give it a like, comment, share. You know what's done. Teaching you to suck eggs. If you like it, give it a comment. If you don't, fair enough. And I'll see you guys on the flippity flop. Much love. Bye bye.